For those of you who are new tuning in for the first time, the premise of what we do here is we talk specifically about and unpack topics that are very unique to high performing, high achieving, ambitious women. So these conversations, of course, the space is welcome to everyone. And there are bits and pieces of the information and insights that we unpack together that will benefit most people. And yet, as high achievers, we are wired a little bit differently. And so the type of spaces, the type of conversations, the types of support and tools are unique to our experience. And so we do talk about the systemic impact of how we experience our life today, the generational impact of inherited patterns from the women that came before us, and what we can do today to become the happiest, most relaxed version of ourselves without self sacrifice, without anxiety leading the way, without overthinking leading the way. So, these topics benefit everyone, and yet we are wired a little bit differently, and we possess qualities that only high achievers really have because not everyone cares about having a positive impact in the world. Not everyone cares about being their best, feeling their best, and contributing to their families in a positive way and to society in a positive way. And so this fabric, sometimes people ask me, well, like, what job title do the women in the spaces that you hold have? And it's not about what you do, but who you are. It's about your heart. It's about how you see yourself and what you want to give back into the world and what you want to receive. So often the women in this space are deep feelers, broad thinkers, high achievers. They feel deeply. They want to be their best and they want to also have a positive impact in their work and life. So if this is resonating so far and you can see parts of yourself in what I'm saying, or if you want to stick around to see if it unfolds in a more resonant way as we move along, you are absolutely welcome here. Today is today we're talking about busyness and how busyness shows up in our lives, how it can be either something that fuels us in an empowering way that leaves us completely open to life and resting our heads at night with a tired but satisfied sense of exhaustion, or an exhaustion at the end of the day that feels really draining, where it just this perpetual drain of energy leaking out of us that tends to happen to a lot of high achievers because of how much we're carrying, not only in our responsibilities and our calendars and our schedules, but how much we are holding internally, our internal operating system, and how responsible we feel or you might feel for the people around you in your life. And we're going to be talking about how busyness is actually a protective strategy that you are choosing and inviting into your life, and that you have more power than you know to shift it into something that is not draining, but actually satisfies you and empowers you and propels you in the direction that you really want to be taking your life in. So, before we begin, as I give a brief introduction to myself, thank you, ladies, for sharing in the comments below. I'd share a little bit about myself. So, my name is Violetta or Violet. I am the founder of Expand and Impact, which is a school of emotional mastery and self leadership specifically for high achievers, high performers, deep feelers, deep thinkers, broad thinkers. One of the reasons why I chose this topic of busyness today is because for those of you that have been here before, you'll know that for over 10 years, I really created a life and a career that I felt proud of. That was my dream career, my dream life when I was a little girl. I've always wanted to get paid to travel, to see the world, to have an impact in different communities around the world and integrate myself in this way. And somehow before I turned 30, I was doing it. I had lived in over 5 different countries. I'm in Portugal now. I come from the US, but I lived in Australia. I lived in Hong Kong. I lived in New Zealand. I lived in the US. I lived in Italy. And I would teach leadership skills and emotional intelligence to youth leaders and adult leaders. I was very involved in the outdoor culture and outdoor industry as someone that looks as feminine as me, guiding expeditions where we were backpacking in countries like Cambodia in the jungle. We were summiting peaks in Peru and rock climbing in Australia or canoeing somewhere in the world. And this was an adventurous life that I had always dreamed of. And it was also a really busy life because I was constantly traveling and very responsible for other people the majority of the time. So when I would be at work, I was on 24/7 for multiple weeks on end before I even got to go home and have a weekend. So because of the structure of my job, and for those of you that do like shift work, you'll also have this experience where when you're at work, you're at work. There is no time off. There is no free time really. Even if you have downtime, you're still knowing that you're responsible for the people in your care and you're very hyper vigilant around what's going on around you and what's expected of you. And so I remember one year I traveled so much for work that I actually flew 50 times in one year from grounding to takeoff, grounding to takeoff, and back to landing. I flew 50 times for the job and for some personal travel in between. And so oftentimes when like the reason why I share this actually is because when we think of success, we often have this ingrained socially constructed belief that there has to be a level of struggle attached or that you're constantly working towards meeting your goals. But what happens when you actually meet your goals and you're living a life that you wanted, that you envisioned for yourself, but it's still not feeling that satisfying and you're still burning out and you're still anxious and you're still overwhelmed and you're still overthinking? Because this is exactly what happened to me. And I, from the outside looking in, looked like I had it all together. I was living this adventurous life and this impactful life because I was doing work that influenced the well being and the leadership and the next generation of leaders. So, from the outside looking in, it looked like this really adventurous life that not everyone wants, but a lot of people want, this sense of freedom, adventure, travel, new experiences, impact. And yet, at the end of my time in this industry, I burnt out and it took me about 2 years to recover from mentally and emotionally. And that's when I realized that it doesn't matter how many hours you work in the day. It doesn't matter if you're doing work you love or if you're doing work you hate, or if you feel that you've made it and you're living the life that you wanted, or if you're still working towards it. Because unless you know how to regulate your internal operating system, and really come home back to yourself and really unpack your relationship to busyness, to success, to self worth, it doesn't matter what you do, how your life looks, you will continue to burn out and perpetuate more anxiety in your life, more overwhelm and overthinking, regardless of what your life looks. Because these experiences come from the inside out. They are not given to us from the inside, from the outside in. Of course, you might have had this experience where you go on vacation and you finally, after a couple of days, unwind and you're able to be present in the experience. And you feel a deeper sense of presence and relaxation and ease in your body. And you feel, oh, finally, the rest that I've been wanting, it's here. But what happens after? What happens during this time? You might notice that your mind starts to spin again. You start to get overwhelmed, or you start to look in your surroundings of how can I be productive? Who needs my help? How can I influence the people around me in some way? How can I contribute? It's these things that impact our ability to truly be grounded and present for the life that we're creating. It has very little to do with what we achieve and how our life looks, and everything to do on the skills of regulating our internal operating system. Because our peace and our sense of self and our grounding comes from the inside out. And decisions and a life built off of anxiety or proving or low self esteem or low self worth or overthinking or overwhelm or urgency, decisions rooted in those qualities will perpetuate more of that. Decisions rooted in lack perpetuate more experiences of lack, even if you are living the dream life that you always wanted to. But instead, if we learn how to fuel ourselves from deep presence, deep grounding, deep self worth, high self worth, and deep self trust, an unshakable confidence that regardless of what happens around us, that if we slow down, the earth won't crumble. All our hard work won't go to waste. People around us won't lose their footing or things won't crumble around us. If we can really learn how to regulate ourselves from the inside out and really meet ourselves on that deeper level, then every action we take from this space breeds more abundance. It breeds more impact. It breeds more presence. It breeds more satisfaction. And it breeds more feelings of being successful. This is the difference between busyness that drains us and busyness that fuels us, where we feel satisfied, where we choose to be busy, and busyness isn't something that is protecting us from feeling, from being, where busyness isn't defining our worth or defining our contribution, but it's actually something that we're actively choosing to be a part of or to not be a part. I'd love to hear how this is landing so far. Maybe there is a word or phrase that stood out to you. Maybe there's a full body rejection or resistance or reaction to what I'm saying. If you notice any of that, that is all welcome here in this space. We are here to explore, and my invitation always is take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And as we continue on our journey, we'll unpack busyness a little bit more, of the difference between active conscious choice versus a protective mechanism that actually creates an upper limit in your life and keeps you repeating the same emotional and mental patterns of struggle instead of expanding you into your next level, your next version of yourself, your next impact. After this conversation, we transition into an integration practice, either breath work or meditation, that will help us land in the information and help support your internal system and creating more sustainable change and shifts so you can continue to take those actions that are rooted in high self-worth and high self-trust and deep presence into your day and into your life. So thank you so much for being here with me so far. And that internal feeling that if I do slow down, things will start to crumble is so strong that how can it be any other way? And there is a deep fear attached to this. And I want to say I completely hear you and I feel you in this, Laura, because I've been there too at one point. And that sense of urgency and that sense of worry and fear that's laced in that thought and belief, it has every right to be here. Because at some point in your life, you learned that moving slower might be lazy, that if you are moving slower, you will be the one that's left behind, or someone will have an opinion on how you're showing up or how you're not showing up. Someone will judge you, someone will criticize you for it. And there might have been moments where you weren't accepted fully as you were, and like on an emotional level. And I remember even when I was traveling so much for work, and I love to travel, I still do it, but it's no longer a thing that I'm almost using as an escape mechanism. It's something that now is like I'm just as happy and content sitting on my couch with a cup of tea, looking at the sunrise in my living room as I am in Cambodia on the top of the mountain, looking at hot air balloons flying around me. It's that level of peace and contentness is the same wherever I am. And I also remember feeling that if I, like, even when I was traveling a lot for work, that if I stop doing that, if I slow down, everything I've worked hard for will start to crumble. And there was this fear of like, well, how will people view me as well? How will they view me at work? How will they view me in my family? If you've built the reputation and the self-image that I am the person that gets things done, I am the person that shows up. I am the person that offers and shows up when other people don't. I'm there. And so maybe some of this is resonating, maybe it isn't, but I'd like to offer some of these things for reflection in case any of it does resonate, because it's this part of you that feels this deeply, like it's there for a reason. And in our practice today, we'll spend some time inviting this part of you in so that it can feel a little bit safer, slowing down and really see whether it's true that things will crumble or whether it's a very strong internal feeling, because not everything you feel and experience is real, right? Not all feelings are fact, but all feelings are valid. It's absolutely true. There are two sides to it. A career, the shoulds. This should be awesome. I'm living the career that should be fun, and yet it's draining, because when we start attaching the shoulds and should nots, we start disconnecting ourselves from the real reason and real purpose of why we're doing it. And so sometimes for some of us, or for many of us, it's being in a career that is a means to an end, and then finding a way to transition into something more purposeful. And my invitation for you here, which we'll be getting into in a moment, is unless that internal foundation is really there, and we really take the time to understand where those moments of busyness and urgency, where they're coming from, what worries they have, the fear of how it pushes us to act from reaction instead of conscious choice, what they're protecting us from, how they're protecting us, because busyness is often a protective strategy that keeps us from feeling the worry, the fear that comes with, well, I should enjoy this. Let me keep being busy because parts of me are really not liking how this is feeling. But to admit that might mean, like, if I admit that, doesn't mean I've just spent 15 years of my life working towards something that I don't even want. Now, this doesn't have to be true. It's just a perspective. So all of our experiences and how busyness keeps us protected in a lot of ways. It is a protection mechanism until we slow down enough to really meet the root and what it's protecting us from, until we develop the courage to sit with that and really understand it and regulate ourselves from the inside out from a solid foundation, that we deeply trust ourselves, that no matter what we uncover with these questions that might be hard to ask, these parts of ourselves that might be really hard to look at, that we might even feel some shame or guilt around, until we really slow down and ask these questions and trust ourselves and the spaces that we find ourselves in, that regardless of the answer, we can figure it out. We can pivot. It doesn't mean time is wasted. It's just information to move us forward into the next evolution and the next expansion of who we really want to be and who we are meant to be before someone told us who we are supposed to be. Someone asked me a question of how to build more trust in uncertainty or feel more comfortable in the uncomfortable, in the discomfort of doing things differently. And this space is a beautiful way to connect and shed insight. But that question was really difficult for me to answer. And if you were here, you will have been here for this conversation, because this is not something that you can explain and understand on an intellectual level. It's something that has to be felt on a felt sense. So it's like, I can tell you A through Z. I can tell you the steps that it takes to really like build that foundation here in this space. But until you actually experience it, practice it, and like bring in the tools and resources and build that skill set internally, that experience of it, it's just going to stay in the intellectual mind and not translate to an embodiment of the work where we're actually living and experiencing it. So this is something that before I trained in holistic psychology and nervous system work and somatic therapy and all of the modalities that I use to support women in our communities today, before I trained in that. So my work was in experiential education. So I wasn't in a typical classroom setting sharing information, but we were actually experiencing the depth of discomfort, how you react when you are suspended on a rope on the side of a cliff, rock climbing, how you react and what comes up for you when you have a backpack that's half of your body weight with a tent inside, all of the food you're going to need for the time you're out in the forest or in the bush, and you're pushing yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally up a mountain, and then you're building camp and you're in complete wilderness. We were doing immersive experiential skills. And this is the industry that showed me what is missing in our modern social systems, like even modern talk therapy, that there is a difference between understanding intellectually and talking about something and experiencing it on a visceral level. So it was coming from this experiential industry that showed me the gaps in the personal development and the healing space. That the embodiment aspect of it, the experience aspect of it, it is a skill set in itself that we need to learn how to combine the doing and the being, the thinking and the feeling for an integrated whole, a holistic approach. Because if we leave one of these aspects of ourselves out, if we just stay in the doing and stay in the intellectualizing, we're going to miss very important pieces of information that are coming from deep inside of us. We're going to continue to use busyness as an excuse, as something that is happening to us, as something that is happening out of our control, instead of really coming into communion with that internal honesty and that truth of our experience. That part of us that is saying, hey, I'm trying to communicate something to you, but you're not listening. This anxiety, it's not you, it's a sign. This overwhelm, it's a signal, it's a red flag. We're trying to get your attention. So if anyone has also burnt out like I did, for a lot of us high achievers, this is really beautiful information to share in. But for many high achievers, we are so good at pushing through and overriding the signals of our body that we have no choice but to burn out, because that is how life shakes us violently awake. It gives us no choice but to listen. All of those times where we ignored our impulses because we were too busy, someone needed us more. It wasn't okay to slow down. I didn't have the time for it. Something else was more important. Every time you say no to something, you are saying yes to something else. Just like every time you say yes to something, you say yes to being more busy. You say yes to another obligation. You are saying no to something else. When you say yes out of obligation, you are saying no to yourself, to meeting what you need in that moment. Heather, this is a realization for many people working in the healthcare system, and it's tricky because so many years of education. Nurse, 25 years going back to school, very burnt out. Yeah, actually, ladies, Heather and Rita, I'm running a workshop for the United Healthcare Service in a couple of weeks about this exact thing. So they've invited me to talk about the internal load and how to actually shift it. So I don't know if you guys work in the UK, but maybe you'll be at this training that I'm running with them. But I want to just share that it is a very real thing that convinces us as well, this internal operating system, when you are putting so much of yourself into the care of others, whether it's family life and motherhood, whether it's your job in the education or healthcare industry, or any other logistical field as well. Like mine was both emotional labor, and then it was also mental labor, because logistically I was like guiding all of these expeditions. So I had like 15 students to take care of mentally, emotionally, physically. I was like the main medical team on there. I was the leader. I was taking care of everyone's emotional needs. And I was also taking care of all of the logistics of like, if we are here, how do we get there? And what do we need to get there? So it was all of these things that I was holding internally, but I was oftentimes in very remote locations. Even like we did a lot of meditation with monks in Thailand, for example. We were in temples, we were in forests, completely disconnected from technology. So I didn't have emails or Slack notifications going off. A lot of the time, the only communication device I had was a satellite phone to connect with the operations team of my old industry, like in case of an emergency. So from the outside looking in, it looked like I was traveling a lot. I was living on purpose. I was in these locations where there was nothing stressful around me, like sitting in my tent or meditating with monks. But it was the internal load that caused me to burn out. It was my inability and the fact that no one taught me how to separate myself from that mental and emotional load and that responsibility. That is the root of burnout. It very seldomly has to do with the amount of time, amount of hours you work, the amount of people you are taking care of, and everything to do with how you react, how you relate, and how do you respond to your environment and that internal load. This is why you can either work in a job you hate and burn out, or you can work a job you love and burn out, because it's very seldomly to do with the actual things on your schedule and to-do list, and everything to do with how you manage that to-do list internally. Are you able to create an internal boundary and put it down? Do you feel safe enough to lay your responsibilities down to rest so you can internally rest and be present with yourself, trusting that you will show up to the occasion, that you will show up for the people that need you, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of yourself. It doesn't have to come at the expense of your peace. It doesn't have to come at the expense of your own well-being. Do you trust yourself enough to show up in that way? Have you built the foundation internally that if you fail or don't rise up perfectly, that if you don't hit every mark, that you're going to be okay? Or is it something that you take as a personal reflection of you? That if you don't hit the mark, if you don't hit the standard, it says something about you. It means you're not good enough. It means you didn't try hard enough. It means you're lazy. It means you're untrustworthy, maybe. When people put their faith in you and you didn't show up perfectly, does that make you a bad leader? Does that make you a weak leader? How do you relate to this? Because that is the difference between actively choosing how we fill our time and our schedule and being busy. Because I love to be busy, but I also am never exhausted from my busyness where it's draining me because I actively choose to be busy in ways that fill me up, that help me feel purposeful in my life, that help me support my clients and show up for the women in my community from a space of deep connection and pleasure and joy, even though it's not always easy. Great point. We can even keep ourselves busy learning mind-body approaches and techniques without actually getting real and doing the work. We can continue to stay in our head thinking we're making progress because of how much we know. Tammy, I want to acknowledge you for this awesome, honest share, because this is truly, truly, truly one of the qualities that keeps many high achievers stuck, is the constant learning and doing and information absorbing cycle without trusting ourselves to apply it, because sometimes the application feels too slow and we don't feel the breakthrough in the moment, and we're not patient enough with ourselves and with the process to really trust that we are heading in the direction and the results that we actually want. And so we keep spinning in our mind, listening to the podcasts, hiring multiple coaches, enrolling in multiple programs, switching from therapist to therapist, or reading all of the personal development books. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have a whole bookshelf of personal development books that I love. And I have a bunch of like support systems that I reach out to in spaces that I'm a part of. But the tricky thing happens is when we are not mindful of the mental load that's actually adding into our life and how it's filling our system, our internal load, before we're actually integrating and putting into practice what we're learning. Because if we keep it all in our head, we're never going to build the skills necessary to apply it when it matters most. And what I mean by that is, if we keep it all in our head, we're going to have the answer in a beautiful, intellectual, eloquent way when we're grounded, when we're centered. We'll know how to advise someone. But when we're under pressure and we feel that inner load taking over us and we're overwhelmed and we're anxious and we're overthinking and we're even starting to have like emotional reactions where we're either shutting down completely and isolating ourselves and falling into numbness or depression or not feeling energized and happy, or we're doing the opposite and we're having that opposite end of the experience when we're like anxious and we're angry and we're snappy and we're short-tempered and we're meeting like anger with anger or aggression with aggression or frustration with frustration. It's in those moments when we're experiencing that high intensity and that pressure and those triggers where it really shows how much we've integrated the information that we've been absorbing. And so I actually just released a podcast episode yesterday. We have Expand and Impact podcasts, and every Monday we have a new episode we just relaunched. And it's about how slower is actually faster. And the women that work with me personally will have learned this as well within the first few weeks of how slower is faster, how more information isn't necessarily the best approach, how we have to really slow things down internally to speed things up externally. Because when you are making decisions from urgency, from that place of busyness, I can, I shouldn't, I should not. I'm too busy. You'll never be able to make a different decision and show up in a different way. Because when does the busyness end? It doesn't. How many people do you know that are too busy to live life? A question that I would invite you to consider is, when I am caught in the busyness, what am I hoping it will give me? What am I working towards? Is it, if I'm busy enough, I will eventually be able to feel at peace? I will have earned peace. If I'm busy or if I'm successful, like what the thing that you're working towards, then I'll finally be able to have more adventures, to feel more alive, to feel more free. And do you see that using busyness as a reason or as a pathway to get to those things is actually blocking you from those things? Many equate stress with success, except there are two types of stress. There's healthy, productive, proactive stress, and unhealthy chronic stress. Most women that are high achievers have been conditioned to be fueled by the chronic unhealthy stress. And you know it's chronic because you're anxious, you're overwhelmed, you're exhausted, you're snappy, you pendulate between feeling motivated and clear and really focus on your goals and your ambition. Like no one can like say anything to you or put you down. Like you're after it. You're going to do everything you said that you would do, and you've proved it to yourself. And then you swing way back down and you're riddled with the self-doubt. You're riddled with the worry. You're riddled with the fear. You might go into numbness or depression and that opposite end. And it's like this big pendulation of your mood that's often showing, if you have this experience, that it's one of the chronic stresses that's fueling you instead of the healthy stress that's meant to propel you forward in the direction of how you want to feel, who you want to be, how you want to show up, and how you want your life to look like. Because healthy stress leaves you energized. It's the difference between busyness as a protective strategy and busyness as constant choice. Like, I'm not that busy anymore unless I choose to be, but I'm very productive anyway. We also have linked unconsciously that busyness means being productive. That busyness has to be exhausting, which means you're being productive. But you can be productive without that overwhelming busyness where you feel like it's like tunnel vision and you have like, you're waiting to live, you're waiting to be happy, you're waiting to feel at peace. How much have you sacrificed of your own peace and life in the moment to busyness, but told yourself that this busyness is exactly the pathway that's going to give you those things when you get to the end of this busy season, which never seems to come. And I want to also share that every single woman I've worked with has been there. I've been there. This is a very common response of the nervous system. When your system is holding so much internally, there is an inevitable crash that's going to happen, because what goes up must come down. And we have a limited amount of energy internally, which is why we have to sleep, because humans can't function without adequate rest and without adequate sleep, but it has to be quality sleep. We have a limited amount of energy. And when we are always stuck in that urgency of busyness, that's using a lot of our energy, like extra energy. And because we're linking that busyness has to be urgent in order to be productive, that there has to be stress attached to success, or else I'm not productive. And what do I do in those moments that I slow down? That I have to keep learning more and absorbing more, because who am I without it? Because I don't trust myself in the moment to see myself as an authority, as a leader right now. So all of this is using energy, the limited energy we have. So what goes up is when we have a peak in that energy, we have a crash. So this is why so many high achievers specifically will have this pendulum throughout the year, where like summer, 2 weeks into summer, the sun is out, you're feeling more relaxed, better. You finally unwind it. Like, it probably takes you a couple weeks to feel okay moving at a different pace during the summer, and like allowing yourself those adventures and that slowness or a different pace to life. And then September kicks in and the responsibilities ramp up. So we're not releasing that inner load, but we're holding on to that energy. And then December comes, and right before that December break, the energy starts to crash down. And then many people say that they have like seasonal affective disorder, like, what is it? Like the depression that comes in the winter. This is why, one of the reasons why, because we're at that low point in our energy cycle after holding so much internally, believing it's the only way, and then we crash. But what happens after? We start to come out of it and we recover with the season. So I used to believe that I also experienced more depression and sadness and numbness and just being blue in the winter. And this was because I was highly sensitive. I have a very highly sensitive and attuned nervous system. Like many of you, if you're a deep feeler, a deep thinker, you're likely also quite sensitive, and you feel other people's emotions. You feel kind of the energy in the room as well. And I believed for a long time that this was just simply who I was, before I learned that it was actually my nervous system that has been like, I didn't know how to release that inner load. So when that Christmas time, winter would come, it's like you're already naturally moving slower because of the weather, but your responsibilities haven't changed. So you're keeping that energy peaked, but the season is telling you it's dark, move slower, sleep more. You don't believe you can. And then you crash. Like, this is all scientific. This is a reflection of the state of your inner world and your nervous system. And I lived in summer for like 6 years. I left Australia. I lived there for 5 years. I lived in Hong Kong, which was like hot all year round before that. And I lived in New Zealand in between and spent a winter season a few years ago as well. And that was my first time at that point in like 4 years experiencing winter. And I was like, and then I had winter this year again. I was in Copenhagen for the entire winter, and they have like zero sun. There was like 4 hours of light. It was like very dark. It was rainy. It was gloomy. It was so depressing, but I didn't feel depressed. I was able to connect with joy and pleasure and presence with where I was and allow myself to adapt and move slower with the season and the weather around me. And this isn't an accident. This is a skill set that I've both learned and I teach today, that I've implemented into my own life and into the work that I do with my clients over a 15-year period. When you come back into regulation and you learn to release that inner load that you carry, your mood starts to stabilize. So we have those peaks and we have those valleys because the energy that goes up must come down, but it's not so extreme where we experience those huge crashes. It becomes more of like we're riding with the river, we're riding with the waves of the world, of the life. We're not holding so tightly that when there's less light and there's less sunlight and, like our schedule isn't changing, we're not gripping so tightly that our level of productivity and output has to be the same all the time, all year. That is a mindset. That is a belief that causes more internal dysregulation and more internal load. When you believe that your level of output and productivity and energy has to be the same all the time, or else it means you're a failure, or else it means you're weak, or else it means you're not showing up and you're not hitting the standard or the expectations you have of yourself. When we come back into learning how to release that inner load, what you'll find is that there's a bigger sense of flexibility in your life, that you're not holding so tightly to control and being rigid, but you're able to exhale and ride those waves smoother. You're able to do hard things with more ease. You're able to show yourself more self-compassion and more self-love, but genuinely feel that and experience it, and not be something that you should do. Like the differentiation between I should love myself, I should be kind to myself, I should show myself compassion, and it being an intellectual thing, but actually experiencing that. And you've experienced it, and you've translated the information that you have in your mind into your body, into your heart, is because you feel a deep sense of relief. It's like the weight has been lifted off your shoulders. You feel a deeper sense of presence and calm and groundedness. You feel that you have more choices available to you. And busyness isn't something that happens to you, but something that you're choosing and inviting into your life intentionally. Unfortunately, we were just never taught ever. And so I always see it as our responsibility as this generation of women to be able to consciously choose to learn these skills now, because we are likely the very first women in our family to even be asking these questions. I have never met a happy, relaxed, and successful woman until I decided to become her. So I know that it's possible, but I had no example of that in my life, in my schooling, even beyond my family, beyond my maternal lineage. In the schooling system, I have never met a happy, relaxed, and successful woman. In my early professional career, I have never met a happy, relaxed, and successful woman, especially as a feminine person that looks like this in a male-dominated industry. Being happy, relaxed, and successful, the furthest thing from a remote possibility, because I associated being happy, relaxed, and successful with being softer, with being weaker. It's not true. You can bring more of your full self and this aliveness into everything that you do in your life, and allow this to be the energy that fuels you forward, and allow this version of you that's alive, that's free, that's calm, and you have all felt her before, or else you wouldn't be here. What would change for you if you allowed more of her to take up space and fuel your decisions? Fuel the things that you say yes to and how you receive. What would be different? How would you be different? How would you experience your life now that you are waiting for your achievement, your successes, and your actions and your busyness to give you? I feel like I'm not doing enough. Well, what is enough?